A country music festival was in full swing when powerful winds suddenly started blowing. Nobody in the crowd knew that danger was quietly getting closer while the music played. The wind ripped away the rain cover. Then, the stage's metal frames began shaking hard. In just seconds, the entire stage came crashing down, and the situation got even worse. A giant tornado was heading straight for the venue, raced to the location after receiving the emergency call. When they arrived, everything was already complete chaos. Strong winds and heavy rain pounded from all sides. Backup hadn't shown up yet, and the tornado was already under 2 miles away. The band's main singer, Kane Brown, managed to escape, but other people were stuck beneath the collapsed metal frames. Nobody knew exactly how many victims were still pinned down. They couldn't begin the rescue until the entire fallen stage was moved. Right now, they could only use hand-powered winches and rope systems. When the rescue team showed up, the tornado was under 10 minutes away. Alarms went off across the whole city. Everyone received orders to take shelter inside buildings. But one little girl's father had collapsed on the ground, unconscious. When they checked him on the spot, they saw clear signs of a racing heartbeat. After cutting his shirt open, they discovered his neck veins were dangerously swollen, which meant blood couldn't get back to his heart. His lungs were having trouble filling with air, and they needed to release the pressure right away. Every second was critical. The tornado was getting visibly larger. Once they released the air, he regained consciousness. They used heat detection equipment and located 8 victims stuck under the wreckage, but the rope systems couldn't support the massive weight. The motor overheated and broke down. The metal frame slammed back down to the ground. Without a crane, rescuing anyone seemed impossible. Desperate screams came from beneath the wreckage. The tornado was now just 5 minutes away. Dispatcher Cami from 911 recommended leaving immediately. But what would happen to the trapped victims? Their only remaining option was lifting the metal frame using their hands. When they heard the command, all the firefighters gathered in one place. Time equaled life. Each person they saved meant one fewer tragedy. The captain yelled out, 1, 2, 3. The team strained with every bit of strength they had, but the heavy frame refused to budge even an inch. When Kane Brown saw this, he called out to the people who were taking shelter, encouraging everyone to come help. Even though cold rain was falling, people of all kinds, men, women, and children, rushed out to assist with the rescue. In situations like this, only unity could overcome hopelessness. Incredibly, they managed to raise the frame just high enough to make a gap. The captain immediately ordered the firefighters to drag the victims out one at a time. Then the dispatcher sent another warning. The tornado was practically on top of them. The captain instructed civilians to retreat back into the shelter, while the firefighters remained to continue the search. At last, they heard the final victim crying for help. A fireworks technician named Manny was stranded at the top of the metal tower. The tornado had almost arrived. They were running out of time. As the firefighters went up the ladder, a massive black whirlwind charged toward them with terrifying power. A tech billionaire named Trip Howard was kayaking in the ocean while participating in a company board meeting by video call. A whale swallowed him. Everyone in the meeting became frozen, completely stunned and unable to speak. Nobody could tell if they should feel happy or sad. The only thing they could actually do was dial 911. Fortunately, the whale that swallowed Trip was a humpback whale, a filter-feeding creature with no teeth and a throat that's very small. There was no way it could swallow a full-grown man, so it just kept Trip in its mouth temporarily. Luckily, Trip was carrying a satellite phone while kayaking, which allowed firefighters to maintain contact with him. But truthfully, there wasn't a lot they could do besides telling him to breathe more slowly and conserve oxygen. They followed the whale's position using the phone signal, but the actual challenge was figuring out how to extract him. Buck recalled that he had once watched a documentary about whales. After surfacing, humpback whales frequently spit out whatever they can't digest, but they are capable of staying underwater for as long as 45 minutes. And given Trip's condition, he probably couldn't survive even 10. Their only option was making the whale come to the surface. Temporary Captain Chim thought of an idea. Because whales are extremely sensitive to sound, they could attempt using noise to force it upward. As for the method to transmit the noise underwater, they took a parking cone and positioned it over the fire truck siren, hooked it up to a split valve, then connected a fire hose. Once the siren was activated, the 120 decibel sound would go down into the water. Following Chim's command, Ravi turned the valve and Eddie activated the siren. The loud noise rapidly reached the whale's ears. At the same time, Trip's condition was deteriorating. As his oxygen depleted, he started losing consciousness. Fortunately, Chim's plan was successful. The humpback whale, disturbed by the sound, surfaced and expelled the foreign object from its mouth. Eddie dove into the ocean immediately without hesitating, and Trip was finally saved. Following a round of CPR, Trip became conscious again. Back at the office, his employees breathed sighs of relief. It appeared they didn't need to worry about the company going bankrupt quite yet. During a children's birthday party, a girl named Faith received a birthday present from her Aunt Gabby, a kite. While they were flying the kite, something incredible took place. Faith got caught in a powerful gust of wind and was carried high up into the air. Gabby frantically dialed 911 for help, and dispatcher Cami took the call and coordinated the rescue operation. Initially, Cami proposed using a bed sheet as a makeshift net to catch Faith, but the powerful wind blew the sheet away. Then, she rapidly organized the adults who were present to link hands and create a human net. And working together, they successfully caught Faith safely when she came back down to the ground. A young man named Blue worked as a stripper. That evening, after his performance ended, he went to the back alley to take a break. Right then, a pedal tavern transporting a group of bachelorette party guests came rolling down the nearby street. All the women were singing and drinking with excitement. One of them was Amy, a somewhat overweight girl who started feeling a little sick. She mentioned, "I shouldn't have eaten that hot chicken before." Nobody gave it much thought, and they continued pedaling vigorously. Then Amy began coughing nonstop. The bride-to-be Molly asked with worry, "Are you okay?" When Amy gave no answer, everyone understood something was seriously wrong. They immediately stopped the vehicle. The driver climbed off to examine Amy's condition, but right at that instant, the party continued. The women kept pedaling, and the cart went rolling downhill. They failed to notice one critical problem. The driver hadn't climbed back onto the vehicle yet. Because of this, the pedal tavern spun out of control and slammed into a car. That shocking incident was witnessed by Blue, the stripper from before. At the crash location, the bride-to-be Molly had suffered severe injuries. Her leg was trapped under the cart, losing a lot of blood. The situation was critical, but the rescue team hadn't arrived yet. Blue observed what had occurred and said, "We got to stop the bleeding." He then pulled out a bottle of oil that resembled lubricant and applied it directly onto Molly's leg. The women asked what type of oil it was. Blue answered, "It's stripper oil." Amy then yelled, "What kind of fireman are you?" Blue remained silent. He skillfully helped Molly slip out from underneath the cart. To stop the bleeding, Blue removed his shirt, took off his belt, and fastened it tightly around Molly's leg, creating a simple but effective tourniquet. Right then, the fire department finally showed up and assumed control of the rescue. Captain Don Hart was amazed by Blue's swift first aid response. At that moment, he also discovered Blue was actually his long-lost son. Afterward, Blue appeared at the fire station, and Don gave him a position as a trainee. Firehouse 51 received an emergency call they originally believed was a fire incident. Upon arriving at the scene, they discovered the situation was far more complex. The site contained a burning truck and a gas station that had been impacted. Eventually, the burning truck stopped moving after an accident. When the firefighters got to the gas station, they discovered an injured woman. After examining her, they understood her injuries were severe. A man stepped forward and explained he was the person who had called 911. He informed them he had witnessed her being attacked by two men in a pickup truck. In the meantime, the other firefighters quickly extinguished the truck fire. Paramedic Mikami hurried over to assess the driver's condition. Looking at the severely burned man, Mikami shook her head with disappointment and stated, "I got to tag this black and get to the other patient." Back at the gas station, Lieutenant Saida observed the woman had a gash on the rear of her head. He mentioned she had been attacked by two guys from that truck. Mikami's brow furrowed, and she said there was only one person inside the burning truck. Severide immediately understood something wasn't right. It appeared one of the attackers had fled. Suddenly, he noticed a wounded man close by. When the man spotted Severide, he became frightened and began running. Severide leaped forward and brought him down to the ground. Right then, the police finally showed up. Due to Severide's courage, the second attacker was turned over to the officer. Shortly afterward, the firefighters received another call. This one concerned a house fire, but when they reached the address, there were no indications of any fire whatsoever. Crew suspected it could just be some kids fooling around, but Lieutenant Kidd refused to take any risks. He commanded the crew to divide up and inspect the area. At that instant, paramedic Mikami saw a staggering man emerging from the shadows. The man mumbled, "He shot me," before dropping to the ground from a gunshot injury. Out of nowhere, a black car raced toward them. Men in the car fired shots at the firefighters. They rapidly shielded the injured man to guard him from the gunfire. Thankfully, the black car quickly sped off and none of the firefighters got hurt. Mikami right away began performing CPR on the man. Crews walked over and questioned if anyone had spotted the shooters. To everyone's amazement, the new firefighter, Vasquez, confidently detailed the car's model and even what the driver looked like. This caused the others to regard him with newfound respect. Novak sliced open the man's t-shirt and put her finger on the bullet wound that kept bleeding. The man clenched his teeth in pain. After applying a quick bandage, they hurried him into the ambulance. At that point, there was still no indication of the police. It was obvious that in this understaffed and slow-responding Chicago, the firefighters needed to assume quasi-law enforcement duties, managing the scene, safeguarding victims, and maintaining security until the officers showed up.
A boy named Michel leaves his house and rides his bike to a costume shop, hoping to buy a Spider-Man costume for Halloween. After looking at the costume for a while, he knocks on the door so the owner can let him in, but the man says he's not open yet. Michel doesn't understand this and keeps trying to get the man to open the door, but the owner insists the shop is still closed. Michel eventually walks away from there, but as someone bumps into him, he almost loses his money. After he saves it from flying away, Michel gets on his bike and heads to school. When he gets there, he parks his bike and hides his money inside his shoe before going inside. While he's in class, Michel secretly records a video of his crush, Stella, but he stops just as someone sees him. As his teacher also sees him with his phone, she takes it away and asks if he wants to repeat 9th grade like a bully named Ivan. Michel doesn't say anything, but Ivan finds it funny and makes a joke with his friend, Brando. Almost immediately, the school principal enters the classroom and tells the students that a police inspector, Giovanna, wants to speak to them. Giovanna then greets the students and asks if they know where a classmate named Martino is. Ivan and Brando make another joke, but Giovanna ignores them and says that if anyone sees or hears from Martino, they need to contact the police right away. After she's done talking, one of her officers gives her something, and she suddenly stares at Michel, who looks worried. Just then, Giovanna walks up to his table and tells him that he forgot his lunch. Michel looks ashamed, but he collects his food and thanks her, calling her his mom. After she walks away, Ivan and Brando make fun of Michel for having his mom bring his lunch to him at school. Michel doesn't respond to them, but he notices that his nose is now bleeding. Michel immediately leaves the classroom to clean his nose and wash his hands in the restroom. As he's about to leave, he hears the school bell ringing and quickly hides inside one of the toilet stalls, looking scared. After a while, Ivan and Brando find him and break a part of the door before pulling him out. They then ask for his money, and even though Michel claims he has none, they eventually check his shoe and find the costume money. Michel is not happy about this, but he can't complain because he's afraid of the bullies, who give him a head start to run away before Ivan starts shooting him with a paintball gun. As Michel runs away, he initially avoids getting hit by Ivan, but he's quite unlucky, and he gets shot eventually. He falls down in the middle of some kids at the school, and the bullies tease him as they walk past. Much later, Michel heads home, and his sister, Candela, looks excited to see him. Michel doesn't want to be bothered, and he heads to the kitchen to greet the cook. She then tells him that there's food for him, but as he learns that his mom cooked it, he says he's not interested. As Michel gets to his room, He turns on his computer and starts looking at Stella's social media page while also thinking about whether to send her a friend request or not. Meanwhile, Candela keeps bothering Michelle and asking how it's possible that Superman's identity remains unknown, even though he only wears a pair of glasses as his disguise. Michelle doesn't seem bothered by this, and after he sends a friend request to Stella, he checks his small box to see if he has any money left. Unfortunately, there's only a small note there, but Michelle still looks desperate to buy a costume so he can attend Stella's Halloween party later that day. He eventually leaves the house and heads to a local shop to buy a cheap costume. As he gets there, he's shown an old Chinese superhero costume, and even though he doesn't like it, the shop owner convinces him that it's really nice. Michelle then asks what the superhero's powers are, but the shop owner says he'll find out for himself. Elsewhere, Giovanna receives a video of Martino telling his parents that he only went away because he's fed up with being at home. Giovanna doesn't understand why he would do that, and she also feels it's strange because he's a really smart boy. Later that night, she arrives home and sees Michelle looking sad while wearing his Halloween costume. Giovanna asks why he hasn't gone to Stella's party, and he says he doesn't like his costume because he doesn't even know who the superhero is. Giovanna doesn't think it's so bad, and she says the superhero might be a really good person who fights crime well. Michelle asks if it's like his dad, and Giovanna says he also fought bad guys. However, she adds that he was just a police officer like her before his death. As Michelle still thinks about whether to go to the party, Giovanna encourages him, and he eventually leaves. Shortly after, he arrives at the party, and Stella looks happy to see him. As she talks about her costume, Brando sees Michelle and asks what he's wearing. He says it's a Chinese superhero costume, and Stella says it's nice. She also mentions that she has been to China before. Michelle then asks how long she'll be staying in town, and she says she hopes to stay for a long time because she likes the fact that it's close to the sea. Michelle likes this, but as they keep talking, they suddenly see some of the guests gathering around the TV. As they go closer, Stella sees a video of herself playing on the TV. Brando then mentions that he got the videos from Michelle's phone after it was taken by the teacher earlier that day. As Stella looks at him, Michelle looks embarrassed and runs away to the bathroom. He then laments about how things are turning out for him. As he also complains about his costume and says he doesn't know what it can do, he makes a wish to be invisible. And lightning suddenly strikes in the area. Michelle eventually jumps out of the window and heads home, looking disappointed. The next morning, Michelle wakes up and sees his dog looking at him strangely. He ignores it and heads to the bathroom to take his bath. While brushing his teeth and looking in the mirror, he suddenly notices that he's now invisible. Michelle looks shocked and doesn't know what to do. As his mom enters the room, she doesn't see anyone there, and she wonders where Michelle is. She eventually looks around and only sees the dog, but Michelle quickly writes a note saying he has already left for school. After Giovanna leaves the house, Michelle wraps himself up with some clothes and heads to school. However, as he's about to go inside, he reconsiders and calls himself a monster because he thinks it's strange that he's invisible. Before he heads back home, he sees Ivan putting his paintball gun inside his bag, and this gives Michelle an idea. He then enters the classroom and takes out the paintball gun from Ivan's bag. After he shoots it on the board near the teacher, Michelle drops the paintball gun on Ivan. Everyone thinks he did it, and the teacher scolds him. Meanwhile, Michelle sneaks into the teacher's office and finds his test sheet to write the correct answers so he can get a good grade. He then goes to bother Brando while he's playing tennis. Unfortunately, Brando loses his match and his dad scolds him for it. As he's then in the locker room, Michelle plays a prank on him by getting him really scared after he moves a tennis ball. After Michelle eventually leaves the school feeling satisfied, he sees some girls heading into the building. Michelle realizes that they're going into the changing room, so he follows them. When he enters, someone tries to throw a towel on the bench, but it lands on him. As the girls see that there's someone under the towel, they look really shocked. Unfortunately, Michelle's powers start fading, and he becomes visible again. He looks embarrassed by this, and as the girls take off the towel, they see him and scream loudly. Michelle gets reported to the principal, and Giovanna comes over to take him home. While in the car, Giovanna says she doesn't understand why he went into the girls' changing room. She also mentions that he almost got expelled, but Michelle doesn't say anything. The next day at school, a psychologist working with the police named Basili comes to the school to announce that Brando is now missing. As he advises the students to always talk about their emotions instead of running away, everyone keeps looking at Michelle and making fun of him for what happened the previous day. Suddenly, Michelle notices that he's starting to turn invisible again, so he covers his arms and waits for the school bell to ring before running out of the class. As he gets home, he meets Candela in his room, and he quickly turns to face the wall while telling her to leave. Candela doesn't understand why he's sending her out of his room, but she pretends to leave by opening the door and closing it again. As he then takes off his clothes, Candela sees that he's invisible, and she screams loudly. Michelle quickly covers her mouth and tells her not to scream. Candela agrees not to, and Michelle then explains how he likely got his powers from the superhero costume. Candela thinks it looks like magical pajamas that can make people invisible for a long time. Michelle still seems bothered by his new powers, but Candela says he's now a superhero and that he can save people from danger. Michelle says there's no one to save, but Candela mentions that he should call himself the Invisible Boy. The next day, Basili tells Giovanna and the other cops at the police department that he doesn't think there's anything strange about the disappearances of Brando and Martino. He adds that the kids likely just left home because they were overwhelmed by the pressure they were facing at home. Giovanna still thinks there might be something more to it, but Basili mentions that from the messages sent by the boys to their families, it's quite clear that they've not been kidnapped. Much later, Giovanna arrives home while Michele is reading a comic book about superheroes. As she's about to enter his room, he quickly takes off his clothes and Giovanna thinks he's not around. When she gets to her room, she calls someone and laments about how Michelle has been behaving. She also says she thinks he might have found out that he's adopted. Michelle is shocked by this, but he doesn't say anything. He then heads out to the beach and plays with the swing while thinking about what Giovanna said. Coincidentally, Stella also shows up at the beach and sees the swing moving without anyone sitting on it. As she realizes that there's likely someone there, Stella walks closer and asks who it is and if they're a ghost or an angel. Michelle then draws a smiley face on the floor and Stella asks if that's what he looks like. He doesn't say anything, but she still tells him to swing with her. Michelle does just this, and when Stella eventually stops, she asks if he can be her friend. Michelle says he doesn't mind, and Stella offers him a bar of candy. Michelle looks shocked and asks if she's not even scared of him, but she says she's not. Shortly after, Stella realizes that she has to leave for her training, so she asks the invisible person if she'll see him again. He says she will, and she then leaves. Michelle looks happy about this, but as he looks around, he sees a strange blind guy seemingly watching him. This leaves him confused because he's still invisible, but the man eventually walks away. The next day at school, Michelle apologizes to Stella for what happened the other day, but she says it's not a problem. He then sees her draw a smiley face on her book, and this makes him happy. Later that night, he sneaks over to her house, and she lets him in after he draws a smiley face on the window. As she then asks him several questions about himself, Michelle notices that he's starting to turn visible, so he leaves suddenly. When he gets home, Candela encourages Michelle to tell Stella the truth, and he decides to follow her advice. Meanwhile, Stella and her mom are now at the gym for her gymnastics training. Stella seems really distracted, and she misses her steps a few times. Her mom doesn't look happy about this, and she eventually leaves to get a cup of coffee. While Stella continues her training alone, someone shows up inside the gym and shoots her with a sedative. As she passes out, the masked man carries her out of the building, and Michelle sees this just as he arrives. Michelle tries to stop the man from leaving with her, but there's not much he can do. After he eventually leaves, Michelle calls the police and they arrive at the scene quickly. Michelle then tells Giovanna that he feels bad because he couldn't save Stella. However, Giovanna tells him not to worry because she'll be found eventually. Elsewhere, Stella is already at a lab where some tests are being carried out on her. After the results are revealed, the scientists call their commander to tell him that she's not the one they're looking for. The guards at the place then take her to a bunker where she sees Brando and Martino. The next day, Michelle notices that his costume is missing, but he eventually realizes that Giovanna washed it. Unfortunately, it's also now smaller, and even though Candela wears it, she doesn't turn invisible. Michelle then goes to angrily confront Giovanna for ruining his costume. Giovanna says she washed it because it was dirty, but Michelle doesn't seem to care. He also says he hates her, and this surprises Giovanna. As the cook tells Michelle not to speak to his mom like that, he says that Giovanna is not his mother. Giovanna is shocked to hear this, but before she says anything, Michelle leaves, and his powers appear to shatter a glass behind her. While he's then on the beach to clear his mind, the strange man from the other day approaches him and says that his costume has nothing to do with his powers. Michelle looks shocked and wonders if he was the one who kidnapped Stella, but he says he's not. Michelle realizes that he read his mind, and he asks how he's able to do it. The man then introduces himself as Andre G and says that he's Michelle's father. Michelle says his father is dead, but Andre J says that's what he has been told. As he looks confused, Andre J tells him a story of how nuclear radiation gave people powers in Russia many years ago. He was one of those people who were called specials, and they were all taken for experiments, so they could be used as weapons against other countries. In the camp, Andrej met Michelle's mother, Yelena, and they were attracted to each other. After they eventually gave birth to Michelle, they realized that their baby would be experimented on like them, so they fled the camp. The soldiers immediately go after them, so Yelena tells Andrej to run away, while she buys him enough time to leave. After Andrej quickly escapes, Yelena turns invisible and starts trying to fight the soldiers. Unfortunately, the commander discovers where she is and he shoots her down. Andrej then mentions how he took Michelle to many places, until he found a suitable home for him with Giovanna. Michelle realizes that he got his mother's powers, but he still has doubts about Andrej's story. He also asks if Andrej can just randomly read people's minds, and he says he can't. As they stand near a fisherman, he says that the man is already thinking about whether to call the police because he thinks Andrej is going to kidnap Michelle. Elsewhere, Giovanna looks worried that Michelle still hasn't returned home. As Basley sees her, he asks what's going on, and she says she's worried that Michelle is changing. She adds that he just told her that she's not his mother, and she thinks he already knows certain things about her. Before she says anything else, a detective informs her and Basili that someone has just called about a strange man walking around with a boy. They then immediately leave the office and head to the scene. Before they arrive, Michelle asks Andrej how he'll be able to control his powers, and he says it will come to him naturally. He then wipes the fisherman's memory, and Michelle looks shocked. Andrej also gives Michelle a suit that can help him turn invisible without having to take off his clothes. As the cops arrive, Andrej says he needs to leave, but that he'll always be in touch with Michelle because their minds are connected. He adds that Michelle needs to be careful because the bad guys who started the Russian experiment already know about him, and they'll be trying to find him. After he leaves, the cops question the fisherman, but he can't remember anything. As Giovanna asks if Michelle saw anything, he says he didn't, so she tells him to go home. Basili offers to take him home, and Michelle follows him. As they get there, Michelle heads to his room to try out the new costume. After wearing it, he quickly hides it when Basili comes into the room to call him to come downstairs to have something to eat. As they both sit at the table, Basili talks about how Michelle might be going through some changes due to his age. Michelle doesn't understand what he's talking about, but as he sees bloodstains on Basili's shirt, he realizes that he's a bad person. Michelle quickly tries to escape, but Basili says he has already locked the door. He adds that if Michelle calls the police, his friends will die. Luckily, Michelle is able to run away from Basili, and he even uses his powers to turn invisible. Basili looks impressed and says he's just like his mother. Michelle doesn't seem to care, and he keeps running around, but Basili finds a way to trap him inside his room. As he then talks about how his team can help Michelle achieve more with his powers, Michelle traps him with his secret bed and runs away. When he gets outside, he sees Ivan on his bike and stops him so they can leave together. Ivan is shocked because he's talking to an invisible person, but Michelle still insists that they need to leave, so he rides his bike away from the scene. Much later, Giovanna arrives home and sees the place scattered. As she wonders what happened, Andrej knocks on her door and she goes to meet him. Meanwhile, Stella discovers that there's a way she can leave the bunker and possibly send out a call for help. After Brando and Martino help her up, she eventually leaves the bunker and moves around secretly to find her way to the searchlight. Elsewhere, Ivan stops his bike, and Michelle reveals his identity to the bully. Ivan is shocked by this, but Michelle mentions that their friends are in danger. He adds that Basili is among the bad guys, and Ivan says he has always known that something was off about the psychologist because he has seen many of them in the past. Michelle asks why he has seen many psychologists, and Ivan says he has ADHD. After a while, they start wondering how to find their missing friends, and coincidentally, Stella gets to the searchlight and paints a smiley face on it. As she directs it to the sky, Michelle sees this and realizes that Stella is trying to send a message to him. They then follow the light and find out that their friends are being held on a ship. Someone eventually catches Stella and forces her to turn off the light. Ivan and Michelle realize that Stella has likely been caught, so they look worried. As Michelle turns invisible and plans to go inside the ship, Ivan shoots its power unit to trigger an alarm that distracts the guards. After Michelle enters, he sees a control room, where Basili and some other man are watching video footage from inside Giovanna's car. In the video, Andreji praises her for being a good mom to Michelle, and she also says he means so much to her. They both then look worried because they know that Michelle is likely in danger. Suddenly, Michelle mistakenly hits something inside the room, and Basili and his men hear this. They don't see anyone around, and as they leave the room, Michelle follows them. As he tries to open one of the cages inside the ship, someone opens it from the other side, and Michelle sees Stella being moved to a different cage. After she's locked inside, Michelle attacks the guards and forces them to release Stella and the other kids. He then tells the guards to enter the cage so he can lock them inside. As Stella and the others look happy to be free, Michelle takes off his mask and reveals who he is to them. Stella is shocked by this, and she says she didn't know he was the one she had been talking to. Michelle says he is, but before they continue talking, Brando and Martino remind them that they need to leave. Before they do so, Stella says they can't leave because there's a man they need to save on the other side of the ship. Michelle says he can go alone, but Stella suggests following him since she knows where the man is. Following this, Brando and Martino start finding their way out while Stella takes Michelle to see the man she talked about. As they eventually see him, Stella turns on Michelle and points a gun at him. This leaves him shocked, and as he asks if she's one of them, she says she's not Stella. Michelle doesn't understand what's going on, but the man they came to see suddenly touches her and she passes out. He then says his name is Claw and that he can get people to do what he wants by touching them. He also talks about Michelle's potential and says they're alike, but Michelle turns invisible and fights the guards while trying to escape. Before he can do that, Claw says he can't escape, and he also threatens to kill Stella if he tries anything silly again. He adds that he lost Michelle back at his house, and he won't let it happen again. Michelle says he was never at his house, but Claw says he was there as Basili. He adds that he touched Basili and Stella to make them do what he wanted. Michelle still doesn't want to be part of whatever Claw is planning, and he says what he thinks. However, Claw tells his men to release their submarine out of the ship so they can leave. He then tells Michelle that it's time for them to leave because his mom is waiting for them. Michelle says that Yelena is dead, but Claw says she didn't die. He adds that she's now one of them, and she's even the one who told him to bring Michelle back to her. Elsewhere, Giovanna and Andrej find Ivan, and he leads them to the ship. As Giovanna is about to enter, Andrej senses that Michelle is not inside. He also notices that a bomb is inside the ship, and it will explode soon. Before Giovanna turns back, she sees Martino and Brando calling for help, so she saves them. As she also enters the ship, she finds a cage and opens it only to find Basili. He looks quite innocent and thanks her for saving him, but she looks angry and asks for her son. Basili says he doesn't know what she's talking about, but Giovanna doesn't believe him. Andrej then comes in and says that Basili isn't lying. He adds that they need to leave the ship because the bomb is about to go off. Just as they leave, the ship explodes, and Giovanna looks worried for Michelle. Back on the submarine, Claw says that Stella will be sent back to her people in a safety capsule. He adds that Michelle is not a regular person, and he's much more important than he thinks. He also mentions that specials are not like humans who waste their lives away. As Stella is taken into the capsule, Claw says it's for the best because Michelle will now be part of a proper family that doesn't involve normal people. Michelle doesn't look happy about this, and as he gets really angry, he starts breaking things inside the submarine. Claw is shocked by what's happening, but Michelle still causes an explosion and enters the safety capsule. As Claus says that Yelena would be disappointed in him, Michelle says his mom is dead. He then closes the door, and the safety capsule takes him and Stella back to the surface. When they get back on land, everyone looks happy to see them, and they also admire Michelle's powers. As he sneezes, Giovanna quickly gives him a blanket and looks relieved to see that he's alive. Just then, he sees Andrzej entering a building and tells Giovanna to excuse him. As he goes to meet his father, Michelle says he doesn't want him to leave, but he says he has to. He adds that they'll always be connected, and he'll know when his son needs him. Michelle then asks why Stella was kidnapped when he was the one they were looking for. Andrzej says it doesn't matter anymore, and that the important thing is that no one will remember what happened. As he sees Stella walking outside the room, Michelle goes outside to meet her, and she says she has been looking for him. She then mentions that she's happy about the memorable moments they've shared over the past few days. Michelle says the same, but he adds that she'll soon forget him. Stella doesn't understand this, but Michelle just tells her to meet with the others. As she leaves, Andrzej uses his powers to erase the memories of everyone who knows what happened. The next day, the police commissioner asks Basili and Giovanna how the kids were saved, but they don't seem to remember anything. The commissioner then tells Giovanna to take credit for it because she was the one who brought the kids back. Following this, she heads out of the office and meets the media to take credit for finding the missing kids. Much later at school, Ivan and Brando try to bully Michelle, but he says he won't even argue with them. He then mentions that he already knows that Ivan isn't a bad person, and he just has an attention disorder. He also tells Brando that if he's looking to take out his anger on someone, he can do that on his dad, who he's always angry with. The bullies are shocked to hear this, and they leave him alone. As he heads out, he sees Stella and asks if she's not staying at the school party. Stella says she doesn't want to celebrate being kidnapped, and she's leaving already. As she's about to walk away, Stella asks if he would like to walk with her, and Michelle agrees to follow her. Elsewhere, a soldier reports to his boss that the mission failed and Michelle escaped from them. His boss happens to have invisibility powers, and she sneaks up on him. As she hurts him, he says there's still some good news because Michelle's twin sister Natasha has been found in Morocco. The commander looks happy about this, and it turns out that she's Yelena. Surprisingly, it also turns out that Yelena gave birth to twins, and Andrzej escaped with both of them while she stayed back to fight the soldiers. Even though he started off as someone who didn't want his powers, Michelle eventually saved the day by accepting his responsibility. He also got to meet his father and learn about his mother, who he still doesn't believe is alive. There now appear to be more revelations awaiting Michelle in the future, especially with the possibility of his sister coming into the mix.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe.
The movie starts with an orphan girl named Heidi, who has been living with her Aunt Dede for 5 years. She hasn't been allowed to leave the house, and now Dede is taking her to the Swiss Alps to stay with her grandfather. Dede has a new job in Frankfurt and can't take Heidi with her, so she ignores the neighbors' warnings about the grandpa being antisocial and maybe even dangerous. On their way up the mountain, Heidi takes off her boots and dress and runs around in her underdress enjoying the freedom. As soon as he sees them, the grandpa, Alpoi, gets mad and tells them to leave, saying he doesn't want to care for the girl. Date pretends to leave with Heidi, but really, she takes her behind the house and tells her to stay while she runs away. Alpoi sees this and yells at Date, but Heidi tells him she doesn't want her either. Refusing to accept the girl, Alpoi goes inside and locks the door. Heidi decides to sleep in the barn with the goats. The next morning, Alpoi gives her some goat milk for breakfast and takes her to church. The priest looks at Heidi and says she's healthy and strong. He thinks it's Alpoi's duty to take care of his family, but since the grandpa won't change his mind, the priest says he'll be going to Meinfeld in 3 days and can take Heidi with him to find a farmer who might want her. When they get home, Heidi asks if she should sleep in the barn again, and Alpoi tells her she can sleep wherever she wants. Since he only has 1 bed and 1 chair, Heidi finds a set of stairs that lead to an attic full of hay. She decides that will be her room and tells Alpoi she doesn't want to leave, but he doesn't answer. The next day, a goat herd named Peter comes to get Alpoi's goats. The grandpa asks him to take Heidi for the day and maybe teach her about life in the mountains. Alpoi gives Heidi some cheese and sausage for lunch, and she is happy to go with Peter and run with the goats. She enjoys this much more than being inside all day. While they have fun, Peter takes a bite of her food and then blames it on the goats when Heidi notices. Suddenly, 2 goats start fighting, and Peter hits them with a stick to stop them. Heidi doesn't like this at all and makes him stop. She makes a deal. If he never hits a goat again, she'll give him half of her food every day. Peter gladly accepts, but asks her to promise not to tell Alpohi because people in town say he killed someone. When Heidi comes home, she acts strangely around her grandpa and says she'll sleep in the barn. Alpohi quickly figures out she heard the rumors. He asks Heidi what she trusts more, rumors or her own eyes and ears. Heidi chooses to trust her own judgment and hugs Alpohi before going to sleep in the attic. The next day, while Heidi continues to have fun and bond with Peter, Alpohi does some carpentry to show her how happy he is with her affection. When Heidi comes home, she's surprised to see a second chair at the table and gets some great news. Alpohi will let her stay for good. Weeks pass, and Heidi has fun with Peter every day. She even cuts her hair to be more comfortable. One day, Peter tells her he won't be coming for a few months because he's going to school, and they'll see each other again in the spring. He tells her to come visit him sometime. Heidi wants to go to school too, and whenever they go to town, the neighbors remind Alpohi that a child needs education and friends. Alpohi refuses, saying Heidi can't get down the mountain to go to school in the winter. Things get boring when it starts to snow. Alpohi carves a little bird for Heidi to make her feel better, but it doesn't help much. So he tries to make a sleigh, which works well. They have fun sleighing down the mountain before Alpohi drops Heidi off at Peter's for a play date. Heidi gets to meet Peter's mother and his blind grandmother. The grandmother can't eat many things because she's missing most of her teeth and all they have to eat is stale bread. Peter isn't doing well in school and doesn't see why he needs to learn to read to herd goats, but his mother won't let him quit. When Alpohi comes to get Heidi, she tells him she's realized how lucky she is to have him. Years pass, and Heidi lives a peaceful, happy life with her grandpa. One day, Deet comes back saying she's found a nice place for Heidi with her employers where she can make friends and go to school. However, Alpohi refuses to let Heidi leave and points out that Dada suddenly cares about her. Embarrassed, Dada says she only left Heidi because she had no choice back then. She argues with Alpohi but can't change his mind, so Deet pretends to leave and goes farther up the mountain to find Heidi with the goats. Deet makes the offer again, and when Heidi says she wants to stay, Deet lies and tells her that Alpohi also wants her to go because he wants what's best for her. Upset, Heidi allows Dada to take her away, and Peter sees it all. When he takes the goats back to Alpohi, the grandpa notices Heidi is gone and quickly guesses what happened. He runs all the way to town, but by the time he gets there, it's too late. Deet has already left with Heidi, and the neighbors make fun of Alpohi. In Frankfurt, Heidi is taken to the Sesemann mansion, where she meets the butler, Sebastian, the maid, Tinette, and the governess, Rottenmeier. Rottenmeier is not happy to see Heidi because she looks like a wild child with no manners, but Deet reminds her that this is what they asked for, an unspoiled child to be friends with the house's kid, Clara. After Deet gets her part of the deal and leaves, Heidi meets Clara, who can't walk and uses a wheelchair. The girls immediately become friends. When Heidi accidentally pushes Clara's chair against a table, Clara lies to protect her and says it was her fault. Heidi has a lot to learn to be accepted as Clara's companion. They wash her, give her a proper dress and boots, teach her table manners, and tell her not to run or be loud. Heidi also has to take classes with Clara and shocks everyone when she says she can't read. Rottenmeier wants to get rid of her, but she can't until Clara's dad comes back. So, for now, the instructor has to teach Heidi to read while also keeping up with Clara's lessons. Heidi adapts quickly but doesn't change entirely. She still loves nature more than being inside and dreams of the mountains every night. She also hides bread rolls in her pockets. She and Clara become very close. Clara tells Heidi what happened to her. After her mother died, she became so sick that she lost the ability to walk. Before Heidi, she felt lonely and trapped because her father was always away on business trips. One afternoon, Heidi doesn't want to take a nap and asks Sebastian to open a window for her. Sadly, she still can't see the mountains. Sebastian explains that to see the mountains from there, she would have to go to the very tall city tower. Afterward, Heidi sneaks Clara out of the house to show her the city, since Clara is never allowed to go outside. When they find the city tower, Clara waits by the door while Heidi goes as high as she can, only to be disappointed that she still can't see the mountains. Clara is a little nervous to be alone, but she feels better when she finds a person selling kittens and decides to buy them all. Back at the house, Rottenmeier panics when she can't find the girls and sends everyone out to search. Sebastian finds them, and Clara covers the kittens with her blanket. When they return, Rottenmeier tries to scold them but starts sneezing because of her allergies. The cats jump off Clara's lap, scaring Rottenmeier so badly that she climbs on the furniture, making everyone laugh. Later at dinner, as punishment, Heidi is not allowed to eat and must stand in a corner facing the wall. Rottenmeier promises next time she'll send her to the cellar with rats. Heidi won't stand for this, so after dinner, she picks up all the bread rolls she saved for Peter's grandmother and tries to leave. Rottenmeier stops her, reminding her she's lucky to have fancy clothes and a good education. But what really makes Heidi feel bad is seeing a disappointed Clara, crying and running to her room. After that day, Heidi's dreams get worse, and Clara won't leave her room. Tanette says Clara is sick and blames Heidi for it. Feeling even worse, Heidi visits Clara once the doctor says she's better. She tells Clara that she doesn't want to leave because she hates her. Clara understands but still doesn't want Heidi to go because she's all she has. With Heidi back, Clara starts leaving her room again and going to classes, but reading is still hard for Heidi. A couple of days later, Clara's father, Mr. Sessman, comes home and brings grandmother Sesemann, who Rottenmeier is not happy to see. Clara is very excited. Both Sesemans are happy to meet Heidi. Mr. Sessman is glad Clara looks better because of his idea to get her a friend. But Rottenmeier tries to change his mind by saying Heidi is still wild and won't learn to read. However, grandmother Sesemann wants to see for herself. Later that evening, grandmother Sesemann reads Heidi a bedtime story but doesn't finish it because she wants Heidi to. Heidi admits she can't read because Peter said it was useless. Grandmother Sesemann reminds her not to trust everything she hears. Since Heidi loves stories and wants to know how this one ends, she agrees to try harder and practice more often. The next day, grandmother Sesemann tells her son that Heidi is wonderful and can learn to read. But she can tell the child isn't happy because this house goes against everything she is. Mr. Sesemann refuses to let Heidi go because she makes Clara happy, but grandmother Sesemann points out that he wants her to stay because she makes him feel less guilty about leaving Clara alone. Things get harder when strange noises start every night, and Sebastian sometimes finds the front door open. The servants and even Rottenmeier think there are ghosts, but Mr. Sesemann doesn't believe it. Every day, Heidi practices reading the book grandmother Sesemann left her. She eventually reads the whole story to everyone. The teacher takes all the credit, and Mr. Sesemann decides this shows Heidi is good enough to stay in the house for good. This makes Clara very happy, but Heidi is upset and cries every night. One evening, after grandmother Sesemann has gone home, Mr. Sesemann is playing chess with the doctor when they hear the noises. The men grab their guns thinking it's thieves, but it's just Heidi sleepwalking. She comes down every night, opens the door, and stares into the distance before returning to her room and lying down at the end of the bed, just like she would with a goat. The doctor checks on her and finds her freezing. Mr. Sesemann looks for a blanket and finds a new pile of bread rolls Heidi has been saving. Heidi wakes up, and when the doctor asks if she's in pain, she says her chest hurts. Afterward, the doctor tells Mr. Sesemann privately that Heidi is sick with homesickness, and her nerves are a mess, so she should be sent home. Mr. Sesemann refuses at first, but then he thinks about what happened to his wife. The next morning, when Clara asks about the ghost, her father explains it was Heidi sleepwalking because she's suffering, and that's why they are sending her home. Clara gets very upset and screams at Heidi before going to her room. Heidi is happy to be going back to Alpuhi, but worries about Clara. She tries to talk to her, but Clara won't open the door. When it's time for Heidi to leave, the servants prepare a basket of food for her to take to the mountains. Heidi gives Mr. Sesemann her wooden bird to give to Clara and makes him promise that Clara will visit her one day. After Heidi is gone, Rottenmeier says they'll finally have peace, but karma proves her wrong. There's still a kitten in the house. As Rottenmeier panics, Tanette picks up the kitten and decides to name it Heidi. As soon as she gets back to town, the first thing Heidi does is take off her boots and reunite with Peter. She stops by his house to say hello and drop off the food. Then she runs up the mountain, and after ditching her fancy dress, finally reunites with her beloved grandfather. Heidi easily returns to her old life with a few changes. She's finally allowed to go to school, so in the winter she and Alpul move to a house in town. Her new teacher is much stricter than Clara's and sometimes uses physical punishments. Her classmates laugh at her when she says she wants to be a writer, but at least she does well in her studies, unlike Peter, who still has trouble reading even when Heidi tries to help him. Heidi writes letters to Clara about all the interesting things that happen, saying she misses her a lot and that she should visit. When the letter reaches Clara, it makes her sad because Heidi didn't say goodbye. So grandmother Sesemann gathers some servants and takes Clara up the mountain. The girls are happy to see each other. Grandmother Sesemann has a drink with Alpul and asks if Clara can stay for a few days, offering to pay. Alpul says Clara is a guest and refuses the money. Now it's Heidi's turn to teach her friend about life in the mountains. Clara starts wearing only her underdress and eating without utensils. She also gets to pet the goats, sleep on hay, and see a shooting star. both girls spend all their time together, which makes Peter extremely jealous. He refuses to join them and goes herding alone because Clara can't go up there in her wheelchair, and Heidi wants to stay with her. One morning, Peter arrives before the girls are up and finds the wheelchair outside. His jealousy kicks in, and he pushes the chair off a cliff before running away with the goats. When the family notices the chair's gone, Altbill guesses who did it, so he carries Clara on his back, and they follow the goat herd's path. Now Clara can finally experience the rest of the mountains while Altbill scolds Peter for what he did and makes him watch the girls for the rest of the day. Clara loves the beautiful view, the flowers, and a cute butterfly that lands on her foot. When the butterfly flies away, Clara tries to make it stay and shocks everyone by suddenly standing up. Walking is still hard for her, so she practices for the next few days with the help of Heidi and Peter, who has changed his mind about her after seeing the miracle. When Grandmother Sesamon comes to pick up Clara sometime later, her son is with her and is angrily yelling because he doesn't like the idea of his sick girl being brought here. However, he changes his mind quickly when Clara walks to them using her own feet. After hugs and tears, Grandmother Sesamon gives Heidi a notebook and a pen so she can start writing stories, reminding her to ignore her classmates' mean comments because everyone should do what makes them happy. After saying goodbye to Clara with a tight hug, Heidi returns to her daily routine with Peter. But from now on, she takes her notebook with her so she can write a little every day. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe.
So friends, in today's story, you'll see a man who loves his wife very much. But one night when his wife is away, two beautiful young women knock at his door late at night. After seeing these two gorgeous strangers, will the man get carried away and have fun with them? Or will he remain loyal to his wife? Let's start the story. We're introduced to a man named Evan, who's currently enjoying time with his wife, Karen. His children surprise him with a Father's Day cake. After celebrating, Karen leaves for a vacation with the kids. But Evan has a lot of work, so he has to stay home alone. Later that night, Evan is working on his computer when midnight arrives and someone knocks on his door. When he opens it, he sees two very beautiful young women getting drenched in the rain. The girls, Genesis and Belle, explain they've gotten lost trying to find a party and need shelter from the heavy rain and lightning. Since no one else is home, Evan takes pity on them and lets both girls inside. They're soaking wet, so Evan offers them dry clothes to change into. After changing, both girls start flirting heavily with Evan. But Evan loves his wife very much. Because he's married, he tries to keep his distance from them. The girls become increasingly aggressive with their advances. Evan gets frustrated and decides to send them away, booking a cab to take them home. Realizing they'll have to leave soon, the girls intensify their seduction attempts. But Evan resists all their advances. Soon after, the cab driver arrives outside Evan's house. Seeing the cab, both girls immediately run and hide in the bathroom. When Evan opens the bathroom door to get them, the girls pounce on him like hungry lionesses. This time, Evan can't control himself any longer. He gives in to temptation and becomes intimate with both of them. Meanwhile, the cab driver, seeing no one come out, drives away. The next morning, Evan wakes up and doesn't find either girl next to him in bed. He thinks they've finally left, but then he starts hearing noises coming from the kitchen. Following the sounds, he discovers the two girls have completely trashed his kitchen. Seeing their destructive behavior, Evan gets angry and demands they leave immediately. But Genesis and Belle refuse to go, revealing they've recorded a video of Evan being intimate with them. Hearing this, Evan becomes even more furious. He calls the police station to report these intruders. Seeing Evan calling the cops, both girls quickly start to leave. Evan himself drives them to the address they gave him. After dropping the girls off, he returns home and starts cleaning up the mess they made. That night, Evan is working late on his computer again when he hears someone at his door. He goes to check, but suddenly one of the girls hits him on the head from behind, knocking him unconscious. When Evan regains consciousness, he discovers both his hands and legs are tied to his bed. Belle is standing in front of him and begins forcing herself on him. During the struggle, Evan manages to free one hand. He pushes Belle away and runs to attack Genesis in another room. Just as Evan is about to reach her, Genesis grabs a sharp object and slashes Evan's chest with it, creating a deep wound. Evan collapses unconscious once again. When Evan wakes up this time, he finds himself tied to a chair. The two girls start playing twisted games with him. In the first game, if Evan doesn't answer their questions correctly, they torture him by blasting extremely loud music through headphones. While they are playing these sadistic games, Karen's colleague Louis arrives at the house. Seeing Louis enter, Belle quickly drags Evan to another room to hide him. Genesis goes to greet Louis, pretending to be Evan's cousin. But Louis knows Evan doesn't have a cousin, so he becomes suspicious of this strange girl. He starts questioning her. Meanwhile, he hears sounds coming from another room. When he enters to investigate, he finds Evan tied to the chair. Seeing this, Lewis becomes enraged and lunges at both girls, trying to attack them without even untying his friend first. But Lewis slips and his head strikes a stone sculpture, knocking him unconscious. The two girls work together to dispose of his body, killing him. After murdering Evan's friend, Genesis and Belle tell Evan they're going to kill him too by morning. The next day arrives and they tie Evan up with ropes, drag him outside to a remote spot and start burying him alive. They bury his entire body in the ground, leaving only his head exposed above the surface. Facing his own death, Evan desperately asks the girls what mistake he made. What did he do wrong? The girls respond coldly, telling Evan he doesn't truly love his wife and children. He just puts on a show. They say if he really loved his family, he would never have been intimate with them that first night. Belle walks up to Evan and says, "I once thought you were different from other men, but you're not." After saying this, both women leave Evan there, buried and helpless, and walk away. Some time passes. Evan's wife Karen arrives home with their children. When she walks into the house and sees the complete destruction and chaos everywhere, she's utterly shocked and horrified. Meanwhile, Evan remains buried up to his neck in the ground, screaming desperately for help, with no guarantee that anyone will find him in time. And that's where our story ends, friends. In the open scene, a woman named Vera is looking for a summer job. Isaac, the recruiter at the agency, offers her a position as an assistant for the Owens, commenting she was chosen specifically by them. Vera's wary because she doesn't think she's suited for the position, but she changes her mind when she sees the Owens even sent money in advance. Meanwhile, Isaac's secretary is writing a bunch of invitation letters for the guests that will be attending the Owens special party. In another corner of the city, a broadcaster is hired to record a few lines that supposedly will be used in a play. A few days later, Vera is on the train on her way to her new job and can't help imagining a dangerous rope hanging from the window. She gets even more uncomfortable when she realizes she's being stared at by Philip, so she goes looking for a new place to sit. After walking by businessman William, she ends up in the same cabin as Lawrence, a retired judge. On a road nearby, Dr. Edwards trying to drive responsibly but almost gets in an accident when he's passed by Anthony, who drives like a maniac. A few hours later, all these people gather at the dock with General John to take a boat to Soldier Island, where the party will be held. But when they get there, they're surprised to discover the Owens haven't arrived. Butler Thomas and his wife Ethel explain the hosts will be arriving later and introduce them to the final two guests that got here earlier on their own, Anthony and Emily. The guests then proceed to get comfortable in their rooms. William takes some notes about the others because somehow he already had a full list of everyone's names. Philip takes a gun out of his suitcase that he hides on the night table, and Anthony has fun with an illegal substance. The guests also discover that in every room of the house there's a framed poem called 10 Soldiers, which tells the story of 10 men that got together to dine and died one by one in different ways. Afterward, Vera takes a look around the house and ends up in the below stairs only to be stopped by Ethel, who points out this area is staff only. Vera explains she was hired as an assistant, but Ethel tells her the Owens left explicit instructions of treating her as a guest. In the evening, dinner is announced with a gong, and the guests gather in the dining room where they discover that in the middle of the table there are 10 figurines to match the 10 soldiers from the poem. Dinner goes well with lots of conversation, yet the Owens still don't show up, and Thomas explains there isn't a telephone to check on them. When the conversation touches on the matter of cars, Edward realizes Anthony is the guy that ran him off the road, but Anthony denies it and triggers an argument. The other guests quickly cut it off, making Anthony offer a very fake apology. After dinner, the piece is interrupted when a strange voice coming from a speaker proceeds to name all the guests to accuse them of murder, even mentioning the name of their victims. All the guests are offended by this and demand an explanation, so Thomas takes them to the room Vera saw earlier and reveals this had been a recording. At that moment, the voice accuses the staff members of murder as well, and Thomas has to go check on Ethel because she's having a panic attack that makes her pass out. While Thomas takes Ethel to her room so Edward can check on her, Anthony freaks out and grabs William to demand answers, since supposedly he was close friends with the Owens. William has no choice but to confess he's a detective and not a businessman. Edward prepares a mild medicine to help Ethel sleep, and after he leaves, Ethel freaks out about having been discovered, but Thomas tells her to keep quiet. A moment later, everyone gets together to discuss what happened, and Thomas explains the Owens left him instructions to play the record after dinner, but he had no idea of its contents. Thomas wouldn't have played it if he had known, and explains that he and his wife didn't end anyone's life. But in a flashback, it's shown he did use a pillow to end their previous employer's life while Ethel watched. Anthony and Emily deny knowing what the recording was talking about, and Edward explains the name mentioned by the recording was a surgical patient whose procedure got the usual complications and didn't survive. John says his supposed victim was just a soldier that died in the war, and Lawrence explains he gave the death penalty to a criminal that everyone thought innocent, but he had access to extra evidence as a judge. William's man drowned in his own vomit while in jail, and Vera worked as a governess for a little kid that sneaked off and drowned in the sea when he wasn't supposed to swim. All these were clearly accidents, but Philip doesn't deny his own case and admits he did end the lives of 21 men in Africa. Everyone else calls him a monster, but Philip points out he was on a job and wasn't any different from regular soldiers. This prompts Anthony to suddenly remember the names. They were two kids that were playing in the dark, and he accidentally ran over them with his car. However, in his memory, it's clear that it was daytime, and he was just driving like a maniac. After telling his story, Anthony takes another sip of his drink and suddenly begins choking. The other guests carefully lower him on the floor, but when Edward checks on him, he confirms Anthony's already gone. The men take the body to Anthony's room and find the illegal substances, but William forbids them from hiding them because this is now a police investigation. Afterward, everyone agrees to go to bed and leave in the morning. Ethel continues to have nightmares about the night of the crime, but her dreaming is interrupted by a mysterious knock on the door. Edward also spends the night having nightmares about the operation that went wrong, filled with blood and guilt. He's suddenly woken up in the morning by Thomas, who wants him to check on his wife. Unfortunately, by the time Edward gets there, he can only confirm Ethel has been gone for a few hours. Meanwhile, Philip decides he'll go to breakfast with his gun just in case. When he leaves his room, he finds William looking at Anthony's body and making an important discovery. Anthony's mouth smells of cyanide. Edward bumps into Vera, who brings him to the dining room to show him that now there are only 8 figurines on the table. Edward doesn't take her seriously, and after he leaves, Vera has a vision of her old employer Olivia that reminds her of the day she lost the kid. She, Olivia, and the child Cyril were having a nice day on the beach, and Olivia had to scold Cyril for wanting to swim when he wasn't strong enough to do it. Later, they were joined by Cyril's uncle Hugo, who Vera instantly fell in love with. A moment later, everyone has breakfast prepared by Thomas, and Vera insists on asking about the figurines, but the others swear they didn't touch them. Vera is still worried because Anthony's and Ethel's deaths match the lines of the poem, and she thinks healthy young men like Anthony don't die out of nowhere. She wonders why Edward brought medicines with him if he came for a party and not for work, prompting Edward to admit he was supposed to treat Mrs. Owen. Vera still thinks they should check his bag, and Edward finally gives in, but only after pointing out that then they should also check Lawrence's things because Edward saw him in the cancer ward in his clinic. Both suitcases are checked, but they only find mild medicine, nothing dangerous, and an offended Edward throws Vera's suitcase open in revenge. Afterward, Philip approaches Vera in private and explains he ended those men's lives for diamonds, before asking Vera about her own truth. But Vera sticks to her story. She loved the kid, and almost drowned too, trying to save him. Meanwhile, John's packing his things and remembering the day his friend Henry died. During the war, John found letters from his wife in Henry's jacket because they had been having an affair behind John's back. When he saw Henry again, John pretended everything was fine, but as soon as Henry turned around, John shot him. Downstairs, Philip's asking Thomas for more information, and Thomas explains he and his wife had been on the island for a week, but they never saw anyone except for the sailor that came with supplies. Philip thinks the Owens must be hiding somewhere on the island, and William agrees to go searching with him. While they look around together, William tells Philip about how his prisoner fell in his cell, but it's revealed that William had actually beaten the poor guy to death. John is also out for some fresh air, and when Vera checks on him, he confesses his wife died of influenza after the war, and that he regrets not letting her be happy. He also thinks the boat won't come and that they're stuck here. After Vera leaves, John has a vision of Henry haunting him. In the house, a drunk Edward joins Philip and William on their search. They hear a noise coming from Anthony's room and Philip rushes in with his gun out, but it's only Thomas, who was looking for a camp bed that was stored in that room because he doesn't want to sleep next to his wife's body. Unlike the guests, he isn't allowed to leave when the boat comes. In the meantime, Vera helps Emily with her wool and gets to hear her story, which she hadn't wanted to share in front of the men. Emily had hired a foundling girl as her maid and taught her all she knew, but the girl got into trouble and Emily refused to help her, so the girl ended things for herself. After Vera goes inside for some tea, Emily notices there's a storm coming, but the birds are actually strange. When she comes closer to check, she discovers the birds are flying above John, who is now gone. A moment later, the men bring John's body inside, and William confirms this is without a doubt murder. Vera checks the figurines again and notices another one went missing. Remembering how she failed to save Cyril and scared by all these deaths, Vera goes to the beach to end things, but Lawrence stops her and brings her back into the house. The guests have a meeting to discuss things and start by asking Philip about his gun. He explains he wasn't invited here. He had also been hired by Isaac under Owen's orders, who paid him well for coming as a mercenary ready to act if necessary. Lawrence came because he was told a friend of his was going to be here. Emily came because Mrs. Owen had been interested in her work on education. William was told someone would come under false pretenses, and a cop would be needed, so Owen supplied a list of guests. And Edward came as a doctor for Mrs. Owen. However, everyone got these invites through letters and never got to meet the Owens. At that moment, Lawrence realizes that the initials that signed the letters were UN Owen, which sounds like unknown. Lawrence thinks this is a riddle, and the perpetrator is one of them. Meanwhile, Thomas discovers there are some liver and kidneys missing from the fridge. The boat never comes, so when night falls, everyone goes to sleep and locks their doors. Emily prays for protection and gets terrified when she has a vision of her maid appearing next to her. The next morning, Edward desperately hits the gong downstairs to make everyone wake up because he found Thomas gone. The perpetrator had used an axe, once again matching the poem and proving Vera right. While Philip and William take the body to his room, Vera makes coffee, but Emily doesn't drink it because she can't trust it. Edward approaches Lawrence in private, and after apologizing for telling everyone about his illness, he asks him for an alliance, which Lawrence accepts. Sometime later, Vera's walking through the house when she sees something that shocks her and makes her check on the figurines, confirming another one's missing. She then hits the gong to call for everyone and show them Emily's also gone. The perpetrator used a knitting needle to imitate the bee sting from the poem. After taking Emily's body to her bed, Philip returns to his room, only to discover his gun's gone. He calls for a meeting and points out he had locked his room, which means someone must have a master key. An argument begins as they start accusing each other of being the perpetrator, and the tension only goes away when William offers as an alibi that he had been constipated in the bathroom. Afterward, they search every room for the gun, and they even undress to only wear a towel or a robe in order to avoid hiding anything in their clothes. Vera changes into the swimming suit she had been wearing the day Cyril died, which makes her remember how Cyril had wanted her to marry Hugo and be his aunt. When she looks at herself in the mirror, Vera finally notices that there's a strange hook on her ceiling. Later, when Vera sees Philip in just a towel, she decides to undo her robe as a silent method of flirting, and they agree to start calling each other by their first names, unaware that Edward's watching them. All the bedrooms are clear, so the group begins searching the rest of the house, but they don't find anything. For dinner, they eat directly from the cans to make sure nothing is poisoned, while the camera reveals the gun and the key are hidden inside a bear rug. Later, while they drink, Vera keeps thinking about Cyril and a conversation she had with his mother. Olivia explained she hadn't known she was pregnant when her husband died, so Hugo stepped in to inherit everything. But when Cyril came along, all his dreams of fortune were shattered. Vera decides she wants to make some tea, and everyone goes with her to the kitchen for safety. The men take the chance to ask Lawrence about all the death penalties he's given, and Lawrence admits he went to see every criminal die because it was his responsibility. The recording had accused him of ending Seaton's life, who the news thought was innocent. But Lawrence had been given Seaton's diaries where he wrote all the terrible things he did. Seaton had been different because he refused the hood in order to look Lawrence in the eye while he died, and that look still haunts Lawrence. Hearing the word haunt makes Vera see Cyril standing nearby, but also makes her remember getting intimate with Hugo on the beach. Afterward, Lawrence goes to the living room to read, and Vera returns to her bedroom. While she's washing her face, Cyril appears behind her, and suddenly a hand appears on the sink and tries to harm her. As memories of Cyril's death flood her mind, Philip and Edward come to the room to find her on the floor, explaining she had had a panic attack. She turns down the brandy that William brings her because she's suspicious, so Philip goes looking for a closed bottle. The group begins to drink and discuss the weird hook in Vera's bedroom, but they suddenly realize Lawrence didn't come when Vera screamed. They rush downstairs and discover Lawrence has been shot in his reading chair, just like the poem says. The body is taken to the corresponding bedroom, and while everyone argues over accusations, Vera finds another figurine gone. The group hates the fact they can only wait to die, so they decide to throw a party where they get drunk and consume Anthony's illegal substances while listening to the recording with the accusations. Philip and Vera get very close while dancing, and Edward tells William about his suspicions of the young couple working together. Philip promises Vera that he'll protect her, and when it's time for everyone to go to bed, Philip follows Vera to her room so they can spend the night getting intimate. Meanwhile, William thinks about the night his prisoner died. The poor boy had been accused of watching other men inappropriately in a public bathroom, and William tries to imagine himself letting the guy go. But even in his imagination, he ends up harming the guy. At that moment, William hears a noise and leaves the room to discover Edward running downstairs, so he goes to pick Philip up to go after him together. Vera is left alone in the room and begins thinking about the past again. While she was in the hospital after she almost drowned trying to save Cyril, she was visited by Hugo, who acted very cold toward her. He informed her she was fired because there wasn't a kid for her to watch anymore, but he left her some money and refused to see her again. Sometime later, Philip and William return without having found Edward, but Philip does find his gun just lying on his bed, and another figurine goes missing. Vera remembers that the next death is by a red herring and thinks Edward's still alive, especially since the party had been his idea. William begins wondering if they're all already gone and this is hell, finally admitting he did end his prisoner's life, and Philip has to calm him down. Afterward, William begins looking for Edward, only to suddenly see a huge bear coming after him. Philip and Vera go to the cliff with the intention to start a big fire that could get a boat's attention, but they realize William didn't come with them. They return to the house and find William gone under the bear rug, matching the zoo bear from the poem. Now there are only 2 figurines left on the table. Then Philip and Vera return to the cliff, noticing something on the rocks now that the tide has lowered. It turns out to be Edward, who is also gone. Vera asks Philip to move the body, but as soon as he turns around, Vera steals the gun from his pocket, thinking he's the perpetrator. Philip tries to take the gun from her, and in the struggle, his shoulder's shot. Vera then shoots all the remaining bullets until he's gone. As Vera goes through a breakdown, she remembers the day she testified in court about Cyril's death being an accident. She explained that she ran as fast as she could to save Cyril, yet didn't make it in time, and everyone believed her except Hugo. When they talked in private, Hugo pointed out he saw her run while playing games, and she was very fast, thus he believed she slowed herself down to let Cyril die. Vera denied it, but in her memory it's revealed Cyril didn't sneak off. Vera told him to go swimming, and she did slow down on purpose so Hugo could inherit the money. At that moment, Vera sees Cyril again, who takes her back to the house to show her the hook in her bedroom now has a rope. Vera gets in the chair and decides to end things, like in the poem, only to change her mind when she sees the door open, and Lawrence comes in. In her shock, she accidentally kicks the chair, so she tries her best to stay up while barely breathing and hearing what Lawrence has to say. It turns out the Owens don't exist, and everything had been a plan by Lawrence to get justice for all the people the guests harmed. He had faked his own death using the liver and kidneys he stole from the fridge, and everyone believed the doctor when he confirmed it. But Edward had lied for the sake of their alliance. Lawrence explains Seaton's diaries weren't made public because they were too disturbing, but they woke something in Lawrence, and when Seaton looked at him when he died, Lawrence finally understood they were the same. Lawrence's tumor never got better, and he's planning to use the gun to match his own death with the poem. That way the police will find 10 bodies but no perpetrator because they'll be chasing after the non-existent Owens. Vera tells him there aren't any bullets left for him, so they should lie together and tell the police Philip ended them all. However, Lawrence moves the chair and finally ends Vera's life as he reveals he still has the bullet he took from the gun to fake his own death. Afterward, Lawrence goes to the dining room and puts the 10 figurines together again. He prepares the chairs and drinks to make it look like he had company, then uses the gun to finish the plan exactly like the poem. Thank you for watching. See you next time.